Harrison Price for Monday, May 5th, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the Historic Wall Center. And as always, this program, a presentation of Bet365. Matt Harrison alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show planned for you. First of all, how was your weekend? It was glorious?
Yeah. I mean, it was... it was a little bit cool yesterday, but just to have the sun, what it does chemically for us, I think is, oh my gosh, it's just, you feel lighter. It's amazing. It's a great spring so far. And I can abide by a weekend in which you get overnight rain, but sun on both of the days. It was perfect.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, why?
We had a sick cat.
Yeah? What happened?
Just didn't digest hairballs. So anyways, the cat went for surgery. Mm-hmm. So whatever vacation plans we had for later this year, that budget has now been eaten into. And, of course, he requires monitoring now, like 24/7. Can't go at the wound, can't do this, can't do that.
Pets.
So I stayed at home all weekend minding a conehead cat. I hope yours went better. Mike said he had a terrific weekend when I walked in here.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Conehead pets are not fun.
Well, they're just so pathetic, right?
Yeah.
They're so mopey.
Yeah.
Get this damn cone off my head. Anyway, so we have 2 more weeks of that to look forward to. Going swimmingly over at Arcasa. All right, Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Should the Canucks just let Quinn Hughes pick the next coach? Yes or no? You can vote at the Harrison Price X and YouTube channels. Normally, I would think this crazy talk. What does Gilman always say? Owners own, managers manage, coaches coach, players play. And yet, for a franchise at a crossroads that needs to do everything in its power to keep single-handedly the best defenseman they've ever had, and frankly, a guy who's making a case year by year, the best player they've ever had. And given that he's a hockey nerd, and given that he's got bloodlines and lineage whereby he's got vast amounts of NHL contacts, and given he really liked the guy who said no and walked away here, believe it or not, I voted yes.
I mean, the problem is you can give him the keys to the car like that if you want. There's still the... Does it mildly change his trajectory in the next couple years?
I think it changes a lot for this year, and then that's what matters, right?
You have to believe. The only reason you would give him the decision-making in these sorts of instances is if you believe that his happiness, his contentment, and winning could change the equation about him playing with his brothers. I am in a really fatalist position here. And I don't know that there is change in that position for Quinn Hughes. So I'm going to say no, because you got to think franchise first. You got to think that you're going to be in a position where you're going to have your hand forced regardless. And you might as well just have the guy that you've hired rather than the guy that the departed player has hired anyhow. I want to be wrong. I hope to God that I'm wrong in being fatalist about this Quinn Hughes decision. But right now I get the feeling that winning and contentment with the current situation with the upcoming year is not going to be enough for Quinn Hughes.
So negative.
It is negative.
We're asking this.
It's just based on what I've seen elsewhere in sports. Like we've seen it.
We bring this question to you because Adam Foote has emerged as a strong candidate and would have a, quote, serious chance, according to Elliot Friedman. He points out that Quinn Hughes really likes Adam Foote, who, of course, has been responsible for the Canucks defense over the last 2.5 years as the lead assistant under Rick Tocchet. Elliot, first of all, this is a quote. First of all, he's a really smart guy. That's number one. But number two, I'd be curious to see if that was something that would sort of be Quinn Hughes approved. They're close to, have a good relationship. Foote has really helped Hughes improve as a player, given him good advice, and they bounce things off each other very well. I wouldn't be surprised if, in addition to the fact I think he really knows hockey well, that would have Foote on Vancouver's short list. The theory being that if you can't bring Rick Tocchet back because Rick Tocchet doesn't want to coach here anymore, then that Adam Foote is a proxy, the next best thing to Rick Tocchet. How does Adam Foote strike you as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks?
It doesn't strike me very well. I think he was a great specialist coach for the Vancouver Canucks in helping defensively. I think that worked very well for them. But I think he is not capable at this current time, or does not have the resume to make me believe that he is capable of coaching the totality of the team, that he is capable of coaching offense, which will now be the main issue for the Vancouver Canucks. So I would think that no.
You think coaching offense is going to be the main issue here? It's hard to coach offense, right?
Finding offense, yes.
Okay.
And so finding a way to win while scoring 2 goals or less is going to be difficult for Adam Foote. And I don't know that he is the most progressive guy.
Let's see what he's got. Let's see what he's handed in terms of personnel.
Yep.
That's the manager's managed part of
Except
this.
you got to make the decision on coach before you know that.
Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is if you can go out and land that top 2 center and can get the 2 other forwards that Jim Rutherford talked about, then surely you should have better personnel in terms of scoring goals. Very hard to coach offense. Most coaches, and they're not wrong, look at their role as, my job is not to win the game because I can't go out there and play. My job is to prevent us, eliminate as many ways possible for us to lose the game.
I would be very worried about a Jim Hiller-like team if Adam Foote was
Could it
the head coach.
be any worse than this? Chandler Bing voice. Could it be any worse than this year?
No, but even a repeat of this year is going to be problematic. I don't know. You're not going to make the playoffs with another repeat, right? So, no, I would hope for somebody beyond Adam Foote. And I don't know that Adam Foote is enough to really. Do you think it really moves the meter that much for Quinn Hughes?
I don't know.
Only they know.
All I know is if Adam Foote is the top Quinn Hughes' wish list, he better get serious consideration. Because, in your scenario where Hughes helps pick the coach or that his word goes a long way and they have a poor season and Quinn Hughes tells them next summer, no, I'm not interested in talking extension, and they're pretty much at that point forced to consider trades, if not immediately, then certainly by the deadline. So what's lost here? So you fire the coach and start anew. NHL teams do this all the time. Coaches' shelf lives now are like 3 or 4 years. What's lost?
Well, again, you do have other players on the team.
No, I understand that, but
so 5 coaches in 5 years.
Well,
that's.
Or you ride them out for another year, but know full well at some point you're making the change.
But you just.
Coaches are hard to be fired.
You lean into this franchise is chaos. The Canucks are chaos. Like, you're just admitting to that at that point.
Do they have a counter argument to that right now?
A lot of Chandler Bing over there. Do they have another argument?
She watches a lot of Friends, particularly when we're cooped up with a cat.
By the way,
a cone head over the week.
Great comment. They should have put a cone on JT. That's from Green in the chat.
Hey, yeah.
Hard to nip at the other guys in the room when he's got a big cone on. It's true. It's a good comment.
Can we put him on painkillers and laxatives too?
And the guy in the chat commenting is just named Green. I hope that's not Travis,
He would know.
He would know.
All right, our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi, and Blake and I have been driving the 2024 PHEV Outlander Hybrid for, Well, the last 6 months, and what a magnificent vehicle that is. Brought it back to our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi this past weekend. It was an absolute joy, and suggest you check one out as well. Right now, they're giving you $500 off a newer pre-owned vehicle at Surrey Mitsubishi. You got to mention Canucksarmy price, and tell you this all the time: bring them any offer. You're out there on the market looking for a vehicle. Bring them any offer. Surrey Mitsubishi will beat it. Score more, save more, more value, more savings. Visit 13820 104th Avenue. Our top story today brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Elias Pettersson, still hurt or at least recovering from a couple of ailments, won't be playing for Sweden at the Worlds. That's according to head coach Sam Hallam via Rick Dollywall. So no more hockey for Petey this season. Puts extra emphasis on his off-season training, and sadly will not be joining Vancouver Canucks teammate Marcus Pettersson on the Swedish national team, playing at home there in Stockholm. We also learned that Tom Willander will not be a part of Sweden's final roster there. Willander just missed out. He's played these pre-tournament games and just moved.
They do have a 4-team mini tournament beforehand. With Czechs and Finns and Slovaks, I think. He's going to play in that. Tom Willander will, but he won't be making it to the big tournament. Matt, how concerned are you about the reasoning for Pettersson's absence?
I almost the other way. I'm almost encouraged.
Encouraged.
Yeah.
Because he's worried about being ready for camp.
Because here's the thing. If Elias is in fact still requiring more time to get over whatever it was that was bothering him towards the end of the season, then I would have looked at it as a red flag that he was willing to go out there and bleed for Sweden and put himself at risk and not necessarily focus on what is, needless to say, a very important summer for him. So I actually think it a good thing that he's not playing hockey games, that he's focused on his rehabilitation. Although it stops there because Jim Rutherford told John Shannon's 100% Hockey podcast, and we have John coming up on the program here, that the strength and conditioning guys with the Canucks called him unsolicited. You'll remember Pettersson was working out under the Canucks auspices here since the season ended. Called him unsolicited and said he's working very, very hard. So that was great news. Here's the bad news. Rutherford he spent a week here and then left. Mm-hmm. So is 1 week the commitment the Canucks were hoping for when they said, we've got all the resources available to you here in Vancouver to spend your summer?
No,
probably fell short, right?
We don't know if he's coming back though, right? Like this. Okay. You know, like you've just finished the season. You probably do want to.
Fair enough. I may
have some decompression.
I may have prejudged that.
We'll see. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're going to be able to judge everything in the offseason until really it is complete and we get the lowdown on what exactly has gone on. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Yellow Dog wants to remind you that tomorrow they have a new beer release.
Nice.
And this is kind of fun. I didn't see this coming. Yellow Dog Brewing releasing the new Sour Series mix pack. Double the fun with 2 bold and fruit-loaded sours, the Sundog Raspberry Peach Sour and Wave Rider Mango Pineapple Sour. It's your new go-to zesty, tangy sidekick. Hitting your local liquor store very soon. Love the sours. In the heat of the summer, the sours are spectacular. Check it out from Yellow Dog.
Well, we did learn something on Friday afternoon, which is typically the time when you release news that you're not exactly proud of. There was so much chatter in the last week here. There are Canucks for sale. What's going on? Money problems there. Well, we learned Friday that Paolo Aquilini, the youngest of the 3 Aquilini brothers, has resigned from his position with the team and is leaving the ownership group. I'm not sure that Paolo and Francesco have had the closest of relationships over the years. You occasionally hear about the feuding brothers and this, that, and The other thing, as we talked about last week, Paolo very much took the mantle on the philanthropy side of the Vancouver Canucks and Aquilini Investment Group, the Canucks Autism Network, and other charitable pursuits. As many have said, the guy's got a heart of gold. He wants to save the world, sort of things, and wants to direct his energies and his efforts into making lives better for the unfortunate. Francesco, of course, has been running the Canucks as chairman for nearly 2 decades now. Does this help explain the current financial situation and the reports of a sale? Because, if Francesco and Roberto needed to buy out their brother here, that's a very substantial check given the value of the Vancouver Canucks. And that would make a lot of sense in terms of why they're selling a piece of the team. They're looking for a partner to buy in.
And may explain these murmurs of cash flow issues because they've just written a big check to their own brother. And, we keep hearing about these pre-sales being very low for the development sector, and that's where that liquidity generally comes from to pay for everything else. Well, that's not coming in right now, fast and furious. So all that sort of makes a lot of sense. And so would they sell off 30-40% of the team? Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, of course, the liquidity, it tends to rise as the season ticket money comes on in through the course of the summer. Anyways, I'm not surprised to hear that. I think anybody who watches the Aquilini family and the Canucks have understood that the brothers take varying degrees of interest in the club. Of course, Francesco runs it, but Roberto's more the finance guy. Aquilini Investment Group's the core business. And as mentioned, Paolo more on the philanthropy side. So we'll see if there are further murmurs from there. If, in fact, someone does come in to partner with the Aquilinis. And, of course, whether the two brothers remaining now are willing to coexist and own the team in concert together, if they need someone else or if they have the wherewithal going forward to finance the operation. But, people speculating on the sales side, I mean, that would jive with not wanting to foot the bill for a practice facility, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're the guys who are on the verge of selling or think you're selling at some point soon or know there will be a financial pressure on you, be it in your core business with development and pre-sales being where they are, whereby money's not coming in, or tariffs on your agricultural business where you sit there and go, okay, there's going to be a huge financial pressure coming here down the road. You may not be as quick to go out and spend the tens of millions of dollars, whatever the cost might be, for a practice facility and leave it for the next guy, right?
I mean, to me, if you are worried about the money and you do want the practice facility, and you sell a portion of it, and that money just goes straight out the door again to the practice facility. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the most logical thing?
Well, for you, yes. For your new partner, I mean, I guess I think you'd have to be upfront and say, like, look, we need help in financing a practice facility, and that's what we're going to do with your stake off the top.
And then you get naming rights on the arena. You come in, your business is X.
I believe they're locked into Rogers.
No, on the practice facility.
Okay, well,
they name those
if you have a partner, I mean, if you have a civic partner that already has the facility, that might be tricky. But I hear what you're saying. Jim Rutherford appeared, as mentioned, on John Shannon's 100% Hockey podcast with Darren Millard. We will get to the highlights there, and then we got John coming up here. On the coaching search, Rutherford says it's moving quickly. Interviews this week. It's a long list. Previous NHL experience is not necessary. Head coaching experience. So that opens the door to an Adam Foote. That opens the door to a Manny Malhotra. That opens the door to a Mike Vellucci, Penguins assistant, not to mention other candidates that are out there who haven't had the big whistle on an NHL bench. Rutherford mentioned they want to be very careful about interrupting Manny as the Abbotsford Canucks continue their AHL Calder Cup playoff run, now into round 2. He says they will talk at the appropriate time. Said they will ask tough questions, specify tough questions, and see how he responds. Manny, as many know, and you will see this across the National Hockey League with their AHL farm clubs, typically have the farm club playing the NHL system. And that has been the case with the Vancouver Canucks and Abbotsford Canucks. It has been the Rick Tocchet system that Manny Malhotra has been running down in Abbotsford. So you would have continuity there if you hired Manny. But I dread to ask this guy, is that a good thing?
I feel like Manny may be a little less stuck in his ways. I see Manny as a guy a little bit more pliable in terms of what is required. And again, I don't want to paint Rick Tocchet as a fully old school guy, but he had a foot in both of those schools of thought, I think. And while Manny was certainly a defensively aware player, I think he remembered being a top prospect when he was a very offensive player as well. And I'd have a little bit more time for believing that Manny Malhotra would seek out offensive solutions as well as defensive solutions. But ultimately, hey, you can't create experience where there is none. He has never been a head coach at the NHL level. So that still would be a valid concern to bring up, is a devil's advocate position. So, I wish that Manny Malhotra was coming off of a failed attempt as a head coach somewhere else. So this was stop number 2. Mm-hmm. Then I'm really...
We say that a lot about head coaches. It's kind of the Belichick example, that Bill Belichick went to Cleveland, had some successes, was not a total washout.
Yeah.
But got that much better as a head coach for his next stop in New England, which turned out to be, needless to say, exceedingly successful.
Alain Vigneault for a Canucks perspective.
Alain Vigneault as well. Travis Green, as what's happening right now, right? Travis had a very good season behind the bench of the Ottawa Senators after coaching here. I can appreciate not wanting to interrupt Manny, but the fact of the matter is if the Abbotsford Canucks are playing beyond this round, and the second round will wrap up next weekend one way or the other, at that point, I think you have to sit him down and interview him. I mean, you're not putting the whole process on hold awaiting the Abbotsford Canucks' future in the AHL Calder Cup playoffs. And as important as that is for Canucks sports entertainment and for development of prospects and all of that, needless to say, filling your head coaching vacancy is of more importance.
There's generally way more space in between rounds in the AHL than there is in the NHL. I think that's absolutely a good time when you can do it.
And he may interview this week. Who knows? I mean, you would... We'll see. I mean...
Yeah, there's a big break right now. You're right.
There is a big break right now. I'm sure you could find some time. But, yeah...
he's not exactly going to have the best PowerPoint presentation of all the candidates because he's...
How do you know? He could be a PowerPoint wizard.
You're right. He could be. I'm just saying he's got a singular focus. He's not an out-of-work head coach that can really give you the...
Right.
The 300-page thesis as to why I should be the next head coach of your team. So I would forgive him that. But I think what you do is you go through the rigmarole of all the other candidates, Matt, and if you really don't feel like you've got a finalist at all, or you've got a leader, but you're not like gushing over the leader, then you really want to expedite the process here with Manny Malhotra. If you think you've got 10 days to burn, then you could push it and see how far the Abbey Canucks go. But I think you get to everybody else first, and if you got somebody that you really love, you may feel comfortable pulling the trigger on that candidate and not even having the further chat with Manny Malhotra.
All that said, we know the carousel got going last week with Mike Sullivan accepting the New York Rangers job reasonably quickly after resigning from the Pittsburgh Penguins bench. We know Anaheim has already been active interviewing coaching candidates.
We do have another vote of confidence today in Andrew Burnett. So we've talked about John Cooper not being let go and not creating another vacancy where other guys could go. Nashville was a possibility for a lot of people. That vacancy is not going to happen, and Andrew Burnett will not be available.
Yeah, and so you're out there, and I suspect we'll hear more as the week goes on in terms of the Chicago Blackhawks plans. I know Jeff Merrick brought up Jay Woodcroft, the former Edmonton Oilers head coach, on Friday to much discussion. He's expected to be a candidate in Chicago. You've got the Boston Bruins who are on the market, the Philadelphia Flyers, if it's not talk it or bust. Anaheim, as mentioned, Seattle as well. So we'll see what takes place this week. But I think we'll learn a whole lot more as we sit here on Friday. I think we'll have a first of all, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of these vacancies filled by then.
No, neither would I.
And I think we'll have a much better understanding, not just of Canucks candidates, but who might be the guys who are candidates for different vacancies right now.
You think Gerard Gallant gets hired in this window of opportunity? Gerard Gallant?
Unsure.
Yeah.
Gallant is a little bit like Dan Bylsma in terms of he's got to be your cup of tea. That Gallant is less a systems guy and more a people manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he loves veterans. I saw this at the Spengler this year. My goodness. He had a lot of young talent there. He only leaned on the veterans. You got to make sure he could be a finisher for somebody. Mm-hmm.
Did a sensational job with the expansion Vegas Golden Knights, as we all know.
Where you often have veterans.
And did a good job once upon a time in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is that Quinn Hughes did eventually get back to Jim Rutherford. He was indeed golfing, and not only that, his phone had died. We've all been there. A lot of the golf carts, like at Northlands, you've got a plug in there. You can charge
if you bring a cord. Yeah. Also, then you went to the next game. You had a busy day.
Lesson learned, Quinn Hughes, bring your charger cord on the golf course. Jim specified to Shannon, Quinn has never mentioned to them, to the team, that he wants to play with his brothers. So that was not coming from a place of Quinn going specifically to Jim Rutherford or Patrick Alvin or Francesco Aquilini and saying, there will be a day that I want to play with my brothers.
Which is an important distinction, Matt.
It kind of is.
But at the same time, that makes me question even more, why did you say it then?
Mm-hmm.
If it's just stuff in the stratosphere, why are you bringing it up?
I think it's some regret because he mentioned to Shannon that some of the comments were in jest. So I think if Jim gets a mulligan, he would probably want a mulligan. I think he understands what he has said off here. But like he said at the end of the interview, and Merrick was talking about this with us on Friday, that he respects fans. He wants to bring you into the conversation as much as possible. And he's at an age and at a point in his career where he feels like he can do that. He told Shannon and them that, look, he just wants to be honest and transparent as best as possible. So,
and I do wonder, Matt, too, if dealing with U.S. media over the last two stops in his career, where maybe they don't quite hang on every word. And
of course, comments like that don't become war font headlines in Carolina or elsewhere. Anyways, Rutherford talked about how, look, they have 1 year and into the second year at the trade deadline. So 1 2/3 years, 1 3/4 years to deal with it. But he said the priority is this upcoming season, and Quinn Hughes understands
I don't think many other people would agree with that, though. Like, I don't think anybody wants him to start year two.
I think that's the far end of the window here.
Right.
I think if you have a non-playoff campaign, I think one of the things that you're going to do at this time next year, if you're out of the playoffs, is get an indication from Quinn Hughes's representatives whether he is willing to talk extension on July 1st. If the answer is anything but a hearty yes, absolutely, let's get down to brass tacks and make this happen and make Quinn a career Canuck, I think at that point you're on the market trading as good a player as we've seen traded in some time, right?
Do you think winning a playoff series next year, and just one, let's say it's just a second round exit, but you win a playoff series.
Yep.
Does that win over Hughes to some degree?
Good question.
Because anything other than that is
good question.
It's kind of
Can't
crazy
get into
talk.
his head. Of course, he would have already done that at least once, 2 if you want to count the bubble playoffs in his Canucks career. Put it this way, I'd feel a lot better about conference finals.
And conversely, intersecting plot line in this regard, does the fate of the New Jersey Devils next season also come into play there?
Yep. And here's the other thing. Luke Hughes is going for surgery. Both his brothers are going, and especially Jack, pretty significant surgeries.
Yeah.
Are
they diminished next year?
I would not be the least bit surprised if we don't see, the best of the best of Jack or Luke Hughes next season.
How many times have we said this? So-and-so had a down year, but he was coming off of blah, blah, blah surgery. Well, both of them are.
But honestly, Blake, I'm not sure that's going to matter.
In terms of what?
Well, blood is thicker than stats.
Oh, totally. But you do want to see a projection. If I'm leaving the only franchise I've ever known, because remember, by the time he leaves this franchise, presuming he finishes his contract with the Canucks, what is he, 28 when he leaves?
I would have to get that here. Hold on.
So you're starting to be, you're not over the hill, but you can see the top of the hill from where he is at the point of being 28. He's 25 right now, but he's about to turn, isn't he? No, October. So, yeah, he's 26 and 27. His first year with, quote-unquote, the Devils would be year 28 of his life on the planet.
Yeah. But I'm also not sure it's going to matter in this regard. I think the 3 of them are pretty confident. They're like, 3 of us get together. Ultimately, we're going to win.
And they can think whatever they want, of course. But the truth of the matter is that you only have so many kicks at the can.
No.
Right? Like
Sure, but
you'd only have pretty much 4 years of Quinn Hughes at his absolute best at that point. I'm going to give although is Quinn Hughes going to be still as magical at age 32?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you'd have Meyer and Bratt both still there. Meyer would be about 30, 31. Bratt would be about 28, 29. You'd have Heischer at 28, 29. I mean, this is presuming they don't make a ton of moves. You'd have Dawson Mercer at 25-ish.
And remember, if the Canucks do end up pulling off a trade in this regard, they're going to take away some of these players, too.
Yeah, like Siegenthaler, Casey, Nemec, Kovacevic, all would be, still 30 or less, in some cases much younger. I think you're probably at a different goaltender at that point, with Markstrom being 35. But anyways, can we just push pause on the Devils depth chart 2 years from now?
Well, to me, Matt, it boils down to this. What are you hoping happens in order for Quinn Hughes to stay here?
Yeah. So
what
you gave me a scenario. I think it's got to be 2 rounds of the playoffs next year. And I know that's a very high bar for a team that missed the playoffs this year. But I think that is compelling and hopefully convincing enough. I think just missing the playoffs, losing in round 1.
Yeah.
You gave me this scenario where I'm not sure, if you can get to round 2. I guess it would have to sort of be, how does that look like? Do you go 7 games and are close? Do you get beaten 4? Do you have young players at that point, like are Max Sasson and Natu Ratu, really fully formed guys who are no doubt NHL regulars, Mancini as well, that you feel good about your young core? You've got a bunch of them cheap enough that you've got money to go out and spend on the free agent market. So many unknowns, which is partly why I'm a little bit hesitant to go further down this road. I was interested and a little bit disappointed to hear Rutherford say, and again, he's used a lot of dry, self-deprecating humor here in the last couple of weeks, but he said we aren't often on the top of free agent wish lists.
Yeah.
Now, Vancouver is one of the most desirable communities to live in the world over. I mean, even more pronounced against the 31 other NHL markets. Okay, I can understand how this market may have some challenges for NHL players. number one, either the Canucks or Oilers travel the most distance each and every year. The longest flights.
San Jose maybe too, yeah.
The longest flights, the toll on the body, the lack of time at home with the family is more pronounced playing out of Vancouver than it is playing out of eastern markets. That I get. As a tax jurisdiction, it is certainly, of course, not like the zero income tax jurisdictions that we see around the NHL, and is on the higher end compared to a lot of other markets you can play in. The other thing we should note, I think we sometimes forget this with hockey players, is they're here for the worst 6 months in the Vancouver year.
Yeah, it's true. It's why we like to have them stay the summer, because then they can fall in love with the city.
You start your season in early October when, really that's when the rain gets here, and it pretty much goes through the entirety of the NHL season. So I get all of that. Those are the things that you can't really control. Franchise dysfunction, that is something you can control.
Dysfunction and direction.
I do wonder whether, yes, he was pointing towards dysfunction, direction. I think agents and players know that some teams have really great ownership and some teams do not. And I think the word is out about the Aquilinis and the Vancouver Canucks. Look, it is a fishbowl here. It is a rabid hockey market with a very, very engaged media and fan group. Now, for some, that can be a positive, right? Like for a lot of athletes, especially the elite ones, especially the ones that don't lack any confidence, especially the ones who want to thrive amongst like-minded people, that would be an attraction to Vancouver. There are other players who perhaps are shyer, perhaps don't want to see their performance scrutinized like you will performances get scrutinized in a Canadian market, who don't necessarily like that.
So here's a great intersection. Again, this is a story that I've gone 180 on, because I at the outset of the practice facility story, I thought it was much ado about nothing, overplayed. Here's what I've since learned in doing some talking with people. I mentioned this already a couple of shows back with regards to a coach, but it goes for the players too. It's a home base. It is a retreat for them. Rogers Arena is often not available because concerts are in there or whatever, but even when it is available, even when it's a practice day and they're practicing at Rogers Arena, we've talked about that. Rogers Arena is a very small footprint. The facilities that are inside Rogers Arena are small. They are not expansive. They are not akin to a lot of the other facilities around the National Hockey League now. And when you add in the practice facility, where on the off days and practice days, they've got a camp to retreat to where they are comfortable. They can stay 90 minutes after a practice, get all their treatment done, all that sort of stuff. Often outlast the autograph seekers that are outside. It is a fortress of solitude for a team. And for the players that want that little extra layer of privacy, it's a Fort Knox for them. And not having it gets around as, this team takes care of you. When you don't have that, you're a little more exposed.
Yeah. For the most part, NHL players live behind velvet ropes to begin with. Don't have to interact much with the public. I actually don't think that's a necessarily healthy thing for social development.
No,
nevertheless, it is where we are here. Yeah, so there's two different views. Anyways, I do think that helps inform Rutherford's comment that they're more likely to get this top two centerman via trade than free agency.
Yeah,
he has been consistent on that messaging, and when he brings up the we're not top of mind for free agent wish lists, I think he's getting at. I think he's helping inform us as why he said via trade.
Would you be willing to, like, the first round pick alone isn't going to get a good enough center for me?
No,
for me.
I think at this point the die is I think the picture is coming into view, and that it's the 15th overall if it is in fact
Tom
15th.
Willander?
And Tom Willander.
If you had,
And you may have to add a third piece.
if you had to add a roster player that would clearly have value,
Well, not Elias Pettersson at that point. No.
you're probably adding a veteran though. Too.
Is it?
Like
I don't know.
Is Connor Garland a part of that deal?
I don't know. Garland's a part of that deal, then you're still on the market for more.
Yeah. Got to give to get, though.
You've only really replaced, albeit at a more
That's the
advantageous position
thing.
likely someone who is going to score more than Connor Garland. But no, I don't know. I don't know if Ratu or Sasson or a young player on top of that. I think it might also depend on who you're dealing with. Blake.
Yep.
If you're dealing with
a developing team, then
if Rossi is available in Minnesota, take a look at Minnesota's depth chart for next year. Looks pretty good. In fact, looks very good. I think they're going to want someone who can help them get out of the first round. If you're dealing like someone with the New York Islanders, they may be involved in a longer retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, and they may value young players more so than guys who can help them win a playoff round next year. Rutherford allowed that Rick Tocchet's brother was working in Seattle here recently, and he has moved back east. So when Tocchet talks about family situation, that may be part and parcel of what he was talking about. Rutherford said, one of the more difficult conversations he has had in his NHL time when Rick called him and basically said, nope, he wouldn't be returning. He also reiterated something that we have heard for some time with this management and coaching group, that some players are quieter than they'd like them to be. I do wonder whether that's number 40, because I do think Hughes has found his voice here as the captain of the Vancouver Canucks, much like we once saw with Henrik Sedin way back when. Mm-hmm. And he reiterated when he got the job, he told ownership a practice facility must be resolved. They had proposed a 20,000 square foot facility attached to local existing rinks, but it has not worked out yet, and they have now brought people in to work on this file. And yeah, you can understand if the Canucks felt like our brand is so great, we would just build this facility, put our logo on it, and that would be our contribution. And these existing rinks said, well, we would need you to actually buck up as well. So that was Rutherford. And another county heard from here, Edmonton, and Mark Spector of Sportsnet. Gosh, Spector must have like 25 hours in his day, because he's in the middle of covering a playoff series, and he gets a little Budinsky here in Vancouver. And he does tend to find himself interjecting into a lot of markets in the NHL.
He's got gasoline in matches.
He's got a lot of gasoline. I'll give Spector a lot of credit. At his age, he's got endless stamina. What did Gary once say about all the booing in Philadelphia? You have great stamina. Well done, Spec. I mean, you're... Still got your fastball here. It's like Rutherford is a double agent with a mission to inject as much unnecessary drama into the market as possible. Does he not realize what this does to his team's ability to attract or retain players? Do you think Jim Rutherford and his candidness, his candor, is hurting the Vancouver Canucks in their ability to attract and retain players? Do you think players and agents just want a quieter market here?
Maybe, and hey, there's been
Mark may be getting that from players.
There's been no move clauses that have been usurped here.
Although not with the same trauma apparently as the New York Rangers no move.
No, not quite.
I mean, Kuzmenko was not the most NHL made man, right?
And JT Miller was more mutual.
Well, he asked for it. He asked to be out.
Yeah.
Did Mikheyev have a no move as well?
Modified, I think, but look at that up. I think it depends on who you ask in the league, but I would guess there's some people that just would think this is too noisy right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not the typical way an NHL franchise runs, with all sorts of silence and dishonesty.
But I'll say this, though.
I'll say that.
When you have the best player in any one position on your team, that should be an advantage. Like, people should want to play with that guy.
Absolutely. This will be a good test this summer. The NHL Draft Lottery is tonight, everybody, and Blake and I will not be holding a special show on location at a bar. We have done that many, many, many times. And I got to say, we filled up some pretty good rooms over the years with tons of hopeful Canucks fans. We do love meeting audience members. I can remember the first couple hours of those shows being an absolutely exhilarating environment. And then the cards get flipped over. The air completely leaves the room. And then it's Blake and I talking to an empty room. So we've learned that lesson. And with the Canucks having a 1.1% chance to move up the maximum 10 spots to 5th overall in this draft, you cannot move up to number 1 from anywhere below 11. Maybe next year they can turn it up to 11, Blake. But right now at 15, the most they can move up to is 5th. There is also a itty-bitty chance they drop to 16th. If Calgary were to win the lottery, they're the only one who is below Vancouver in the pecking order. But we talked with John Shannon last week about making this a more watchable event. Have you seen what they're doing?
They're going live. They're actually doing it live.
So just, in the past, the actual lotteries, and there are 2 of them, one for the first pick, one for the second pick, have been conducted by some auditor. Forget.
Price Waterhouse, whoever it is.
KPMG, a big firm like that, in a private room with representatives from the NHL and designated representatives from every NHL team. And typically this has happened in the hour or 2 hours before the actual broadcast show.
And usually about 5 reporters are in there too. Usually media members are in there too.
Yes, but everybody has to surrender their phone and stay in the room. It works like a budget lockup if you're familiar with political journalism. Day the province or the feds announce a budget. They invite all the media in the morning. They give them the budget documents and just say, have at it. We know you have reporting to do. It's just you can't publicly disclose any of this until the budget is.
So we've just watched the reveal live.
So we've just been watching the reveal, everybody. This is very smart on the part of the NHL and his broadcast partner, in this case ESPN, for 2 reasons. Number 1, transparency has always been an issue. Like, Gary and the boys don't understand. Why do you mean transparency? We have this auditor and they're certified to do this and their reputation is at stake. And I get all that. Nevertheless, you have hockey fans who don't necessarily trust a behind closed doors process. And frankly, this commissioner has given them reason not to trust a behind closed doors process. He is not a believer in transparency. And so good on them for understanding the transparency, but also it's a better TV show. And John Buchagros of ESPN, who has been, and I guess is hosting tonight, who has been a part of the rehearsals for this, they've run mocks. He said they ran one rehearsal where 6 teams were alive on the final ping pong ball, which is much greater drama than Bill Daly flipping the cards over.
Yeah.
Because remember, in the old system, Bill Daly, the 16th overall pick to the Calgary Flames. Okay, they didn't move up. The 15th pick to the Vancouver Canucks. Okay, they didn't. And you've basically invited those fan bases to go FO, right? I don't need to see anything else here.
We're locked in.
We're locked into our pick. And if you don't understand how the lottery works, so there are a series of numbers that are given to each team corresponding with their percentage of winning the one of the lotteries. So San Jose has a 25.5% chance of winning the lottery. They will be assigned 255 out of 1,000 numbers, different combinations, that land them the first overall pick.
I just hope.
And so with these ping pong balls, everyone comes out, spits a number, and then you put the number down, and is it 5 numbers, 6 numbers? I forget. That allows for more teams to be alive later in the lottery process, which should increase the drama
It's great in
If
theory,
nothing
Matt.
else.
I just hope they present it in a way that is digestible, that when you're watching, that you understand that drama and understand what's at stake.
I think they do. Based on what Butcha Gross has been tweeting here, I
Yeah.
think he understands and the ESPN people understand that you're going to have to lead the horse here, A, because this is new, B, because it's not particularly easy, right? Like there are a lot of numbered combinations that are going to be involved here. Nobody is going to have a checklist at home following along. So I would like to think that they're going to present it with graphics and with visuals and at the very least orally to let everybody know which teams are in, which teams are out as each and one of these numbers comes out the ping pong ball hopper.
We have a little bit of breaking news on the coaching front here.
Okay.
Not that the Canucks have been linked to this guy, but of course, him coming off the market now means that everybody's competing for the other guys together. David Carl has signed an extension at the University of Denver, multi-year extension, so he is foregoing a chance to jump into the National Hockey League. And again, I don't think he was linked to the Canucks at all, but it also means he's not plugging one of the holes elsewhere in the league, and that means it's a feeding frenzy on the rest of the bodies.
And that's interesting because, okay, let's say he wasn't a candidate for the Rangers or was never going to get the Rangers job because of Sullivan. I mean, Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia, say what you will about some of their hockey teams right now, are pretty attractive American markets.
Yeah, big-time American markets.
Maybe you didn't fancy Seattle, Anaheim. Maybe you just thought there's such a lift to do in Chicago and Philly. Boston, the pressure is going to be there to win.
I would have guessed Seattle, Anaheim.
I would have thought because his coaching star really rose this year. I would have thought there would have been some carpe diem there, and he would take one of these gigs. Let's remember, Jim Montgomery came from the same program once upon a time, right?
Yeah.
Got the job in Dallas, had some personal problems, but has now been hired by two other teams since. Dave Haxtell as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Younger team in Anaheim. I would have thought that'd be a great mix there.
Yeah.
Seattle's a progressive franchise. You would have thought they would have shown some interest. He did have talks with several NHL teams, but is saying no.
All right. So Marcus Pettersson is playing for Sweden. Philip Hronek is playing for the Czech Republic. Of course, Drew O'Connor and Connor Garland are playing for Team USA. And Canada, not only getting Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon, but Marc-Andre Fleury as well, playing for the Maple Leaf.
A lot of character.
Singular.
A lot of character.
Yeah. And you got to think that Sidney absolutely adores the fact he's going to get another go with Flower, right? 'Cause Flower just makes everybody's day better. But good on Sidney and Nathan for going to the World Championships a year out from the Olympic Games. And I'm sure Nick Suzuki, Connor Bedard, and some of the others who said no to Canada, particularly if they are fledgling fringe Olympic candidates, have had a oh shit moment here when they see Sidney and Nathan McKinnon are going off.
There's been years where like Andrew Mangiapane leads the Canadian team in scoring. There's not going to be one of those years.
No. You think McKinnon might be okay there?
I think he might do okay.
Hey, two awesome Game 7s on the weekend. This is why you love the Stanley Cup playoffs, and particularly round one, and with many similarities. The home team with a 2-goal deficit and a third period comeback, missing their top forward and defenseman. In Dallas's case, it was Jason Robertson and Heiskanen who weren't playing from the outset. In Winnipeg's case, it was Mark Scheifele and Josh Morrissey, who they lost in game, who weren't there and a part of their third period Game 7 comebacks. I loved what Greg Wyshynski posted. We haven't seen a team win a Game 7 without their top defenseman and second leading scorer since yesterday. Well, Dallas is the first team in Stanley Cup playoff history to be trailing by multiple goals in the third and win the game in regulation, and they do it because Mikko Rantanen does in his former mates the first ever Game 7 hat trick in a third period in Stanley Cup playoff history, the first player to have consecutive games with 4-point periods. Mikko Rantanen did in Game 6 and 7 for his Dallas Stars, and poor Colorado becomes the first team in the history of the NHL, NBA, and Major League Baseball to lose 7 consecutive Game 7s.
And St. Louis leading by 2 on the road They can't consummate. Winnipeg comes back with the latest tying goal.
Perfetti, the latest time goal in Stanley Cup playoff history. It is only the 14th Game 7 to ever require multiple overtimes, the first one we have seen since 2019. And it leaves 3 Canadian teams standing in the second round.
Pretty good.
For the first time since 2004 and only the 5th time in 30 years. Many were saying going into these playoffs, looking at the Leafs, looking at Edmonton, knowing you were going to have at least one Canadian team in the second round, right, because the Battle of Ontario, many were saying this could very well be the year that Canada breaks the drought. 32 years since the Montreal Canadiens won the last Stanley Cup, and 32 teams now, right?
The Jets fully deserved the win. Outshot the Blues 47-29. And
Although I was so worried about them early, Blake. Early,
yeah.
I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, the moment is
and
too
Connor
big
Hellebuyck,
for these guys."
And Connor Hellebuyck wasn't great either early either,
He wasn't.
which is earning him a lot of comparisons in the Winnipeg Jets in total to the 2011 Vancouver Canucks.
Well, this series was almost home team winning, one team getting blown out on the road, as Winnipeg was in St. Louis. So there were a lot of similarities there.
And Hellebuck sinking as he did at a lot of Luongo comparisons.
Yep.
We'll see. He's got runway now to get this out of his system as he moves on to the second round. But remember, Luongo in 2011 didn't look great versus Chicago in moments either.
Right.
So we'll see if Connor Hellebuyck can sort of shake free of this and have himself just a calm, cool, collected series as they reach the second round.
Time now for our menu, brought to you by Greta. Fantastic spot to catch all the games, home and away, pregame, postgame. You are mere steps from the arena or the stadium. Check out the great street food menu they have. Of course, the arcade, weekly drink specials, 50 West Cordova, Greta. Let the games begin. We will speak to John Shannon here on his big interview with Jim Rutherford and his, just his interpretation, if you missed it, of all the questions asked and answered there. And then Dave Hall of Canucksarmy, who has been sitting in with J-Pat on Rinkwide Vancouver, which we're affectionately dubbing Rinkwide Abbotsford these days, following the first 2 games of the Abbotsford Canucks Coachella Valley second round AHL series. Also talked to Dave about the big club and some prospects beyond Abbotsford. All of that is coming up. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. I was very close at the Kentucky Derby, alas missed out on the winner, Blake. I know you don't remember your bet, so I'm just going to fire here. Leafs are the best value when looking at series winners in round 2, but I just can't bring myself. 1, because I think Florida is better. 2, because, well, it's the Leafs. They're insufferable enough without playoff success. Panthers to advance past the Leafs at -180.
I remember my bet because I'm on a heater, and I had said they would have a rotational squad, but that Jaden Nelson would likely start because he didn't start midweek. He did start. He did score. And my anytime goal scorers these days have just been on fire, which makes me question why I'm going away from it in an anytime goal scorer for this one. But a home underdog in the second round of the playoffs, I'm going to jump on that, if only by a little bit. The Capitals taking game 1 tomorrow, +105.
Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals, money lines. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, Stanley Cup champions, so much more. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game, an official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. John Shannon coming up next. Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Whistler Golf Club. And we are super excited this weekend because opening day is May 9th. That is Friday, everybody. Look forward to golf season in Whistler. The spring preparations wrapping up. They're now accepting online bookings for the entirety of the 2025 season. No need to wait. Get those times locked in, particularly if you have a group of 12 or more. Tell you every year. Get your tee times on hold. The prime times fill up fast at the Whistler Golf Club. And, of course, if you got that tee time locked in, tell them about your group, whistlergolf.com/groups. Follow on social at Whistler Golf as we welcome in the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, the host of 100% Hockey. You had a big episode Friday. And, of course, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, Mr. John Shannon. Nice hat, sir. For those on podcast, he's wearing a 100% hat. How you doing?
100% hat, 100% hockey hat. There you go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good. You got your merch in.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got two hats.
Well, you need merch, especially after you do a humdinger of an episode with Jim Rutherford, Canucks president of hockey operations. John, tell us about what your audience and what you heard.
Well, we got the transparent Jim Rutherford one more time, which is, in my mind, after the two press conferences, that's a hat trick of Jimmy just telling it like it is. About Quinn Hughes, what the next 2 years is probably going to be like, about how the process of what he went through with Rick Tocchet, where he is with Willander, where he is with Besser. To me, it was. We shouldn't be surprised anymore. Jim Rutherford shoots from the hip, and all you do is you have to sit back and make sure, and hopefully you ask the right questions.
What were the vibes you got on the Hughes front? Everybody's just trying to read between the lines here. Reading between the lines yourself, what did you feel about the Hughes situation over the next 2 years?
That they have 2 years to prove to Quinn Hughes that this is going to be a competitive place, and that they want to re-sign him. To me, this was... they have to create an environment now for Quinn Hughes not to exercise that unrestricted free agency option that he has in 2 years, period. I mean, that to me is, there's no doubt in my mind that they value his talent and his contributions. And now the onus is on them to prove to him that this is a place to play.
So they can outwin. They can outwin the lure of the brothers.
I think money solves everything, Blake, don't you? I mean, in essence, but yes, I think they can. If the team is winning by the time a contract is presented and he feels good about it, I think they're confident that they can sign him, yes.
What about having him be a part of this head coaching search, John?
I think that what happens with any situation now, with any team, is that you bounce ideas off of your elite players. And so I don't think that's a new thing. I think that that's something that has occurred before. And I just think that it's trying to be open-minded about what's going on with the Canucks.
I was interested in what he said about the head coaching search, where he said the previous NHL experience, head coaching experience, is not necessarily a requirement. We've heard a lot about Mike Vellucci, a Penguins assistant that has meshed with Jimmy at several spots, Plymouth, Carolina, and Pittsburgh. Did you get a sense that he may go with a young coach? Did you get a sense that he may go with a assistant coach that we haven't seen as the top dog before?
My initial reaction was that they were going to go with a veteran guy, Matt. I still think that that's important. And the question was framed on our show as, is Manny Malhotra going to get an opportunity? Mm-hmm. And I certainly think they will put him through the process of getting an interview, but don't think he's ready yet. And so why isn't he ready? Well, you need more experience. And so you're going to need more experience. I've known Mike Vellucci a long time, and you're right. He and Jimmy go back to the Carmanos days. within the Honey Baked Ham organization when it was junior hockey, and Mike was the number one guy with Plymouth, and then got moved to inside the Hurricanes organization. But Mike's a pretty good coach and a good communicator. But I think there's a blank slate right now. And the one thing that really came through for me too is that this is not just Jim Rutherford making the decision. Patrick Alvin needs to be part of this, and Patrick Alvin needs to create a level of communication with the coach more than, in my opinion, than Jim Rutherford does.
And how about Quinn Hughes? Think he's involved in the decision at all?
I think, as I said before, right, I do think that they say, listen, here's our list of guys. Do I think Quinn Hughes is going to interview people? No, I don't think Quinn Hughes is going to interview people. But I do think that they would bounce names off of Quinn. You know, Quinn Hughes is a pretty smart hockey guy. Look, you talked about, pedigree. There's a lot of hockey people that have gone through the Hughes household, whether it be over a beer in the backyard or at a dinner table with Jimmy there, and so there's a lot of knowledge, that institutional knowledge, that can help the Canucks, I think.
The non-head coach guys in the NHL, hey, they've got resumes. I'm not going to belittle the resumes, but are guys like Vellucci, Malhotra, even Adam Foote, who was just on the staff, are they the right avenue for the Canucks? Can they get by? Can they please Hughes? Can they be a competitive team with those guys, or do they need NHL veterans behind the bench? Head coach.
Well, I don't think there's a simple answer to that, Blake. I mean, because if I had told you that Spencer Carberry was going to be, the great young hope that he has become in Washington, after, I'll be honest, he was in Toronto, and of course, with the rules of coaches, you don't talk to assistant coaches. Some people didn't even know Spencer Carberry was on the staff. And yet alone, he goes back to Washington, into their organization, and becomes really one of the bright young lights in the game. So I don't think there's just a simple path that it has to go this way. I think it has to be the right person in the right situation, and creating a positive environment. And so your list and my list could be as good as any list out there, and perhaps we have the right guy, and perhaps we don't. That's the challenge, the subjective challenge of trying to find a really solid head coach for this hockey club.
I was a little bit surprised to hear him say that Vancouver isn't often on the top of free agent wish lists, simply because, I mean, this is one of the most desirable communities to live in the world over, not just amongst the NHL 32. What do you think was driving that? Do you think just the organization has been through so much that players don't look at it as a top destination? Do you think it's the tax bracket? Do you think it's all the travel that one has to do out here? But can you flesh that out? Because I was a little surprised to hear him sort of downplay the market as a free agent destination.
My original question was based on the soap opera that existed this year. And does that make the team less attractive? For instance, I can tell you right now, there are a lot less players interested playing for the New York Rangers right now because of the stories that have been told about the Rangers this year. Yeah. We all know, and listen, the three of us have bias. Once you land in Vancouver, you want to stay. It is one of the great places, and he did admit it's one of the great places to live. But you have to get people open-minded about doing it. I think travel is an aspect of it. I think there is a perception right now how stable is the franchise. But in the end, I do think that he feels that there are times that they're going uphill trying to sign people just because of where they are, time zones. For instance, there are going to be coaches. I think Rick Tocchet not there. One of the reasons, and there's probably more than one, but I think one of the reasons he's not there is because it's not in the Eastern time zone. And that's a factor. And that's a factor for a lot of teams. That's a factor in Seattle. It's a factor in San Jose. It's a factor a few places. By the way, Seattle may have a better tax bracket, but California's taxes are just as bad as British Columbia's.
So. For sure. It's funny. We had a colleague from Toronto here last week, and I think this is like the third or fourth time that he has visited. And he had come in January. He had come in
March.
November. He had come.
Sure.
And finally, last week, he got the best of Vancouver when the sun was shining. He couldn't wipe the smile off his face. He's planning the family holiday and everything for him and the kids to do around here. So, yeah, we get it. We get it in large part. Tocchet, do you suspect that we will hear something about Tocchet's coaching future this week?
I'm not sure about this week. I'm not sure we're in any hurry. I'm not sure Rick's in any hurry. There are good jobs.
I can rephrase
available.
the question. What is the Philadelphia Flyers timeline for hiring a new coach, if that helps?
I don't know exactly about the Flyers timeline, but, this is one where Rick is fully in charge. Because I can assure you, there's more than one team talking to Rick Tocchet at this point. It's
who do you think's interested there, John? Who do you think? Where are the potential Tocchet landing spots as you see them?
Well, I think Boston and I think Pittsburgh. I'm not sure how serious Pittsburgh would be, but I do think that there would have to be an appetite with what's going on in Pittsburgh. And when I say what's going on, you talked about Quinn Hughes being involved in a hiring process. You can bet that Kyle Dubas has phoned 87 and said, "Excuse me, could I have your short list, Sid?" and based on that, I would think that Rick Tocchet's on the short list in Pittsburgh.
And good on 87 for playing for Canada at the World Championships.
Yes.
I was quite surprised to read that. Over,
And Nathan.
And Nathan, too. And I saw you had that story. Well done, Scoops. And I also saw people saying, boy, if you're Nick Suzuki and Connor Bedard and you said no to Team Canada for this World Championship.
Think about Macklin Celebrini is going to be privy to over the course of the next month.
Like that's the next thing that came to my mind is Macklin Celebrini is going to get a firsthand view of his future and what it's like.
Not that we were worried about his
be that boss
off-ice habits, but he's going to get just a crash.
I think the Bedard turning them down probably hurt the guys at Hockey Canada a little bit more than anything else, just because they are pointing beyond this World Championship. They are pointing towards Olympics. They are pointing towards World Cups. And, the better and Connor Bedard has played for Canada lots. We know that. And it has been a difficult year in Chicago, but knowing full well that he turned them down, and then Sydney and Nathan show up, you go, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could have just dragged Connor Bedard with us to Sweden, just to sit in the corner and watch.
Do you think there's a world in which Macklin makes the Olympic team and Connor Bedard does not?
I don't know. I haven't. Gosh, I'll be honest. I'm having with the way the hockey's gone and surviving Four Nations and I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around there's an Olympics next year.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is I really hope they give themselves a little bit more time to evaluate than they did with the Four Nations. Remember, those rosters were picked in December.
I think there's a different timeline, Matt. I
think there has to be because, you remember last year they picked the team and then everyone was like, look at these three Canadian goaltenders who would look like a better trio than the guys who were selected. So yeah, I want to hear that. I want to see that a little later in the definitely the new year. Lastly, John, there's 3 Canadian teams standing in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We have not seen that in 21 years. Who do you feel best about in their ability to advance?
I feel that Edmonton can advance, and I think Toronto can advance, and I think that the Winnipeg Dallas series will be the who is healthier quicker series. If Scheifele and Morrissey can come back, will that balance out Robertson and Heiskanen coming back? difficult not to pick the Dallas Stars right now. They look like they're going the right direction. But listen, I don't think anybody knows. And I think that's one of the magic things about the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. No one knows what's going to happen. The matchups are spectacular. The games have been spectacular. In my opinion, the weekend was the greatest first round weekend in the history of the National Hockey League.
I don't cheer, and
we only had two games. And we only had two games.
Yeah. Very good. Very well put. Contextualized.
I don't cheer, and I certainly don't cheer for these Jets. They're not my Jets, as I've told Matt for years.
Oh, come on.
No. But here's my but. I do cheer for the community, and a lot of people. Do you think that Winnipeg might have needed that win in terms of not in terms of did they want it? Of course they did. But, they are not selling out games anymore in the smallest rink in the NHL.
Took to the last few weeks of the regular season before they started selling out games.
Do they need to have some success?
I think they had 10 sellouts by the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think this was as much a victory for the business side as it was for the hockey side. And I think you saw that at the end of the game with Mark Chipman giving the high fives to the boys coming off the ice. This was an important series for the Winnipeg Jets for the long term. Winnipeg, with what they had done the two previous series in the two previous years, this was as clutch a position as they needed a victory than ever before.
Well, and it's funny you say that about the first round, the greatest first round in Stanley Cup playoff history, or greatest weekend in the first round of Stanley Cup history, because, John, all my friends on my basketball text thread were bemoaning the Game 7s in the NBA, and then I'd go to my timeline, which is, of course, mostly hockey, and, my God, everyone just reveling in the two outstanding games that we saw. So a terrific weekend for the NHL and for hockey, to be sure. Marvelous stuff. Thank you, sir. Great job with Rutherford. We'll catch up next week.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about Rob Blake. My goodness.
Save him for another day.
Yeah. Another manager. Lots of turnover, lots of pressure these days. Lots of pressure.
Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center.
And for years and years now, we can actually say decades, Toyota has been leading the way in terms of electric vehicles, and they've got a new vehicle in that lineup, the BZ4X. You don't know it? You should go check it out. Head to your local Pacific Toyota dealer, ask to take one for a test drive, and find out how fun this car is to drive. I say car, but it has some of the capabilities of almost an SUV with the big hatch, lots of storage capacity, great for every season, and built to take you around British Columbia this summer as well. Go check it out and find out that it also has up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, 0.99% APR financing over the next 36 months. Am I tempting you? HOV lane for life? How about that? ShopToyota.ca, or again, head to your Pacific Toyota dealer.
Dave Hall covers prospects for Canucksarmy. He's been sitting in with Jeff at Rink-Wide Vancouver, Rink-Wide Abbotsford, as we've affectionately dubbed it here during their playoff run. And he joins us now from his home on the island. How are you, Dave?
Doing great. How you guys doing?
Yeah, fantastic. Good to have you back, my friend. First and foremost, just before we get on to the Abbey and the prospects here, what has struck you about the end of this most busy, most noisy Canucks season?
Well, I mean, I think my opinion probably stems throughout the market. It's not great. I just, from one thing to the next, whether it's Tocchet, whether it's Willander, whether it's everything that's going on, it just doesn't seem to foster to a cohesive environment at the moment. So I just hopefully things get worked out, but at the moment it just it's just one thing after another, it seems, and the organization just can't seem to get out of their own way. So
yeah, well, the good news is happening on the farm with Abbotsford, your central area of coverage. 1-1 in this best of 5 series against Coachella, coming home this week for the next 3 games. Yes, they got 3 games here in a row at Abbotsford. Abbey Center, chance to finish it off. That was by their choice. The AHL allows the higher seed to make the choice on how they want the series split up. Tell us about Game 2 on Saturday.
Yeah, well, trying to explain how the AHL playoff formats work from series to series just can't be done in a tweet, considering the amount of text that you get. But yeah, no, it's been a good series so far. It's come as advertised. Coachella Valley they've only been around for 3 seasons, but they've been one of the top teams in that league. They've gone back-to-back seasons in the championship finals, winning one of those. So, we knew it wasn't going to be an easy out for them. Game 1, they looked fantastic. It was one of those games where you just kind of felt like it was going to go their way. And then Game 2 started about as bad as you could. 3-0 deficit after 20 minutes. Nikita Tolopilo comes in after that, and they did what they've done all season, and that's be resilient and mark a terrific comeback. At one point, they were leading 4-3, and it's just an unfortunate. They let in an unfortunate late goal. And then, of course, Nikita Tolopilo, who was fantastic throughout the entire game in relief, gives up a bit of a stinker for the overtime goal, the overtime winners. Sorry, and so it's been good. It's been advertised. It would have been nice for the Abbotsford Canucks to come out with a 2-0 lead, but here it is. But now they get that 3-game home ice advantage. So.
Yeah, it wasn't just the goaltender swap, Dave. I understand Manny Malhotra swapped up his lines and got a jump there. What did he do in terms of his forward combinations, and who got going after the changes?
Definitely. It's one of those things where, down 3-0, you could just kind of keel over and just continue to try to churn out the same results. Like, hopefully in the second period, there's a spark, but no, he came right out in the second. He made the goalie swap first and foremost, Nikita Tolopilo, but he threw his lines in a blender. He put PDG, Phil DiGiuseppe, up to the top line, worked out right away. They scored. And then from there, all 3 lines that were changed made a difference. The line of Nate Smith, Jujhar Khaira, and Sammy Blais made an instant they just made it work. I think they provided 3 of the 4 goals in that rush. So you got to give him credit. As a coach, sometimes you got to kind of fly by the seat of your pants, and he wasn't afraid to kind of switch things up and make sure that they get a new spark, and that it did. So kudos to him, big time.
Leave it to the media, but I'm going to find a negative about this plucky little run for the Abbey Canucks. It's not too prospecty, is it? Like you talked about who was the catalyst for the comeback. You didn't name top-end prospects for the Abbey Canucks. You tend to lean on the veterans come playoff time, and it seems Manny Malhotra has had to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you look to guys like Sammy Blais. He's been a force for this team realistically throughout the back half of the entire season. Basically since January, Sammy Blais has arguably been their best players. Same thing to be said about Jujhar Khaira. I mean, we've definitely seen a lot from Max Sasson. We haven't seen a lot on the score sheet, but from a game to game, from play to play, he's been one of the drivers of the team, and that's no surprise. He's been a driver the entire season. But in terms of guys like Atu Ratu, even Archdeep Baines, we'd love to see a little more from. Jonathan Lekkerimäki, although he's been injured for 2 games, he's been pretty invisible since he's been dropped down to Abbotsford, quite frankly. He just hasn't had that same pop that we were used to seeing before he made the trip to Vancouver. So guys like him, Danila Klimovic, although it's understandable now that he's been demoted back to the 3rd line, he hasn't been firing. He was the guy, 25 goals in the season, led the Abbotsford Canucks. He was on a great upward trajectory, and now he got 1 goal, which is nice to see, but he just hasn't been firing. So yeah, you're right. It's been a lot of the veteran guys that are trying to earn NHL contracts for next 2 seasons. So.
What about the prospect defensemen, Dave? The guys we don't necessarily judge as much by points, Mancini and Kudrayevtsev. How have they done through the AHL playoffs?
Well, Mancini has been a horse. He's like, even if you're not looking for him, you're just going to see him anyways. He's playing a ton of minutes. He's averaging around 23 minutes a game, I believe, at this point. He's playing all situations, and whether it's on the defensive end, boxing guys out, playing that rough and tumble hockey, or it's on the offensive zone. At the AHL, we've seen this from time and time again. Eric Brandstrom, even guys like Archdeep Baines kind of elevate when they go down to the AHL, but he just has he just looks like a different player. He's a bit of a rover, and he's just been skating circles around the entire team. So while it hasn't necessarily shown up on the score sheet, I believe he has just 1 assist in the entire playoffs. He's been the driving force on that back end. So he's been unreal. And Kudrayevtsev, he's just done what he's done all season as a rookie. He's just been steady. He doesn't flash. He's not that guy that's like popping out as a super elite player, but he just doesn't seem to really make a lot of mistakes. He's just always very steady back there, especially as a rookie, breaking up plays with that active stick. And yeah, he's been impressive, but at this point I almost forget about talking about him because we've got that all season long. So
Artie Shelovs is, of course, making headlines. This doesn't ruin that, does it? Game 2, we suspect he gets the start in Game 3?
I would expect so. It's unfortunate. I kind of bring up Nikita Tolopillo's unfortunate blemish because he played so well that I had my thoughts of whether he would maybe start Game 3. He played very well in that second game, but then he gives up that giveaway in the overtime goal. And so while you don't want to blame one play from the thing, I think it's probably best that they're probably going to go back to their guy in Artur Silovs. Even in Series 1 where it's just a best of 3, they had a back-to-back game where we kind of assumed maybe he'd go with Tolopilo in Game 2, but Manny Malhotra rode his guy, and that's already Silov. So he's started every single game. I don't expect him to go any different for Game 3.
And does he look steady? Does he look like a guy who is saying this is my, I can dominate at this level?
Yeah, he's looked really good. There's been times where Abbotsford's made some mistakes. There's been, I believe it was Game 2 specifically in, no, maybe not Game 2, whatever game it was. There's been times where Abbotsford has given up some costly giveaways in the defensive zone, and Artie Silovs has had to stand up and make some pretty big 10-bell saves. So he's looked good. Long range shots have still been a thing. A lot of his goals, two of the 3 goals that we saw on Saturday were long range shots. So that is still a thing, but at the same token, he has been very, very steady, and you can't blame Manny Malhotra for going with him at this point. So.
Jet Wu is injured and not participating in this series, or at least hasn't in Game 2. And I saw your tweet. Tom Willander would look pretty good right now for Abby, huh, Dave?
Yeah. It's not even just as a prospect guy. I think I speak for the entire fan base here, where as with a perfectly viable elite skating right shot defenseman just waiting at the wings, not going to World Championships, he would sure look good on that right side on Wednesday. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. What would you what would be the expectations, Dave, for a 2-year college guy dropping into the HL right now?
Well, I think, I think it depends on what type of caliber of player you're talking about. But with a guy like Tom Willander, we're talking about an elite defenseman, who's probably ready to play third line minutes at the NHL level, let alone the AHL level. So I think he's one of those guys that would come in right away, maybe not be their top guy, only because you have, guys like Victor Mancini playing so well and established himself. But I think he would come in and be a huge difference maker on the penalty kill, secondary power play. He'd come in big minutes. I think he's fully ready to play AHL hockey. And if he was to sign, I don't think he'd have any problem just sliding right in and fitting in. He already looked at home with the big boys at the World Championships. He ultimately didn't make the team, but he looked good. He's playing against full-on NHL players there, and he's not out of line there. So I think he slides right in and helps them win a Calder Cup. Or
still has a few games left with the Swedish team before they head to the Worlds. They got this little mini tournament before they go there. If you're a betting man, do you expect to see Tom Willander in a Vancouver or Abbey Canucks uniform next season, or do you think he becomes trade fodder given what's happened here?
At this point, as much as I hate to say it, you have to think that something deeper is going on here, because if the reports, which at this point I think we have to assume they are true, that it's over $200,000, it just seems too odd to think that that's what's holding this entire thing up. And we do know that the Canucks do need some help up front. It's no question. They need some serious help up front, and they don't have a lot of blue chip prospects to do that. There's pretty much only 2 with that pedigree. So, whether that's Lekaramäki or Tom Willander, someone probably has to go, and that includes the first round pick as well. So, could this just be a way of, just trying to make it easier on the fan base to see him gone? Perhaps, but I'd like to think that he's going to be in a Canuck uniform next year, but at this point, I don't think anyone can confidently say that with any sort of confidence at all.
I was going to ask him who he likes at 15th overall, but Dave's already trading the pick out here, Blake. So we'll save
like
that
everybody else.
We're going to save it, Dave, until we know exactly where they pick. Hey, Snowball's chance, they pick 5th overall, right? And then we got a hell of a story here. So we'll have you back if that's the case, no doubt. Help us out on a couple of Canucks prospects still playing in the, or one still playing in the CHL playoffs. One who is finished. Basil Sansonens, the 7th round pick from last year, is a defensive defenseman with Rimouski. Now, his team's got a game 7 tomorrow night, but it almost doesn't matter because Rimouski's hosting the Memorial Cup, so he will play more hockey this year. Not a big point producer, 12 and 54. He's got 5 and 16 games for the Oceanic in these playoffs. But Blake and I are forever curious about Anthony Romani. Dave, the 6th round pick forward out of Barrie. He missed some time this year after suffering an injury at the Canada World Junior summer camp last year, but then he got back on his horse, and his playoffs were absolutely astounding. He was 12 goals, 12 assists, 24 points in just 16 games. Barrie is done, and he turns 20 this summer, so he's a bit of a later draft pick, but Blake and I are forever interested with this guy because the point totals are just mind-boggling at every single step. Talk to me about Anthony Romani and his season and his future.
Yeah, and by the way, that's 16 games. That's points in all 16 games. He had points in every single playoff game.
Every single game. Wow.
Every single game. And even, I think there was a few games in there where he was just minutes away from breaking that, and then he would get a random goal at the very end of the game, even if they lost it. So, yeah, it's an incredible run, and, you love to see it coming from a 6th round pick, double entry 6th round pick. So it's been a great story. He's one of those players that he's in a bit of an interesting situation. I think at this point he's likely proven all he can at the CHL level. Yes, he could go back as a 20-year-old overager, and I think that's definitely an option. But then you look at the Abbotsford lineup and you look at it for next year and you kind of think, is he ready? We've seen Josh Bloom kind of bounce back and forth, ultimately now just pretty much filling out a Kalamazoo role down in the ECHL. And so you wonder, will that be something that Anthony Romani will kind of follow suit with, as at that 20-year-old level, just like Josh Bloom? Or now we have this interesting window that we already saw Luke Misa from the Calgary Flames organization. He goes over and swaps over to the NCAA ranks. And so I'm not saying that that's a thing that Anthony Romani is going to do, but I think it's definitely an interesting option for him for that, that kind of tweener pick. That's not the elite player that's going to step right into the American Hockey League and, be a difference maker. But it allows him to, a year or two to play against, pretty high level talent. And let's be honest, men at the NCAA level. And so I do wonder if that's something that he's pondering right now.
The 20-year-old year, like if you're a decent player, the 20-year-old year can't really hold a candle to a year of NCAA hockey, right? In terms, it would seem to be a much better developmental tool. If you're already doing this, if you're Anthony Romani already performing like this, what are you going to do to the league next year? Like, you're not getting any better. Your stats will get better, but are you getting
gotta
any
be
better?
pro or NCAA. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. That's how I feel. And I just, I look at the roster and I look how the organization handles the prospects, and I just wonder if if it's a better option to think about NCAA. And again, I'm speaking for him right now, but I just think I don't know if he would be able to carve out. He's a very elite point producer. There's still some things that he could work on, skating, maybe being a little more physical, and so I wonder if that those physical elements are quite there to just slide right into the American Hockey League. So it's something that I am definitely keeping an eye on, and just kind of every day wondering if I'm going to see that he's committed to, Michigan State or something.
Yeah, no, our friend Frank Corrado told us, I want to see, who sees some OHL games where he lives, says, I want to see him play a little bit more on the inside. Yeah. And that would be a big boon to his prospect status because, my God, the points are there. I mean, 1.33 points in the playoffs after another point per game season for Romani.
Now, if you go to school, you do have to sit through Psych 101 or basket weaving 203, and that's not very fun.
That's something that I was thinking about this morning as well. Like, you got to go back to school.
You do have to go through at least the charade of schooling.
You don't think he's going to take trigonometry and French literature? No,
I don't want to presuppose,
no,
but
exactly.
I'm going to guess no.
But
Hey,
but
Dave-
it's sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying it's also really important. You bring up a good point, like as I kind of alluded to as well. Like especially in this organization, I know that Rick Tockett's gone, but Manny Malhotra runs the same kind of system as Rick Tocchet, and like they really believe in those board battles and being hard on the puck and winning things. And Anthony Romani just hasn't shown that really right now. And so if he could take a couple more years to get some strength up, get the regime down, and then make his transition, I just think it would be profitable.
Yeah, but looking forward to watching him. I mean, this is a 6th-round pick who's done pretty well here. And actually his running mate, Riley Patterson, a Canucks pick on that Barrie Colts team as well, did reasonably well this year. Dave, you made us smarter, as always, on prospects. Are you back in with Jeff for Wednesday, Friday here on Rinkwide Vancouver?
I'll be there on Wednesday. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there for Friday or Game 5 if there is a Game 5, but I'm definitely there for Wednesday. So
great stuff. We'll be watching. We'll be listening. Thanks for this, my friend. Good to hear your voice, see your face again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, and if you're heading to a game in downtown Vancouver, make a staycation out of it. Book an exclusive Harrison Price rate here at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for us by name. Some blackout date supply based on availability. You at the golf course at all this weekend?
I was not. No.
Reprieve from the bogey juice then after Thursday's indulgence.
Yes. Yeah. I want to reevaluate my life after the last couple of rounds. Although the bogey juice does make it go by a little bit better, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like a tonic, a salve.
It is.
For everything that ails you on the golf course. And let's face it, we know there will be things that ail you on the golf course.
Hence, bogey juice, period. Apple, ginger, top shelf vodka. It's delicious. And it makes those average to below average days on the golf course that much more tolerable. You can have it, individual servings, big bottle, whatever your template is that you prefer. Use the code SP15, get 15% off your order. Bogeyjuice.com. And by the way, great merch as well.
Oh, fantastic. The game of the golf. So befuddling. Like when I played basketball and my shot was off for a night, I never felt like, oh my God, I got to fully reconstruct my shot.
No.
Golf swing. You go out, you play on a Tuesday, you're hitting it pretty good, go back out there 48 hours later, and everything just feels foreign.
Feels like you've never played.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Abbey Canucks, they played. We know they played. They'll play again. They'll play again. Game 3 Wednesday at Abbotsford Center. Game 3 Wednesday at Abbotsford Center. Game 4 Friday, and we know this one is going at least 4 with the series tied 1-1. Series Jujar-Kara, a couple of goals there in the middle period. In the third to get the Abbey Canucks a slight lead. And he had a 3-point game. Nathan Smith had a 3-point game. Sammy Blais with a 2-assist.
It's disappointing.
Game. Well,
it's disappointing.
I thought you were a little harsh in terms of the prospects had floated a fair bit of the Abbotsford success through the 13-game winning streak down the stretch and into the first round.
In the regular season, yes.
Saturday, they weren't there as much.
But in the end, if you, like we said, we sort of alluded to it there with Dave Hall, but we said going in, the reason why Abbotsford chooses the 2 on the road and then the 3 at home is you go in, you hope for the split, and you come home and you hope to win 2 of 3 and win the series. Well, they got the split. Yeah, it's opportunity lost because it could have been up 2-0 coming home, but you went in there hoping for the split, you got your split. So take care of business at home.
The Vancouver Whitecaps are a wagon loaded onto a steam engine loaded onto a bullet train. They are just the class of the MLS, and it's not particularly close out west. Another victory on Saturday, 2-1 over Real Salt Lake before 19,700 at BC Place. Jaden Nelson with a gorgeous goal. And then there's Pedro Vite. And just know when you're watching the clip of his long pass to Ali Ahmed, he is left-footed because that's just about as good a pass as I have seen in the MLS history of Vancouver Whitecaps FC. And then he follows up on the play and gets an incredible scoring chance. Now, all didn't go perfectly swimming for the Whitecaps. Daniel Rios missed on a penalty shot.
They quickly scored right after, though, which was exactly what you would have wanted to. Being so angry that you missed that they immediately scored like 4 minutes after. So
and then they had other chances as this game rolled along. Yeah. It is another game where you can sit there and say, well, it was 2-1, but it could have been a lot more than that. Salt Lake had a few chances there towards the end of the first half, but holy cow, what a club right now. Yohei Takaoka with his 100th appearance as a Whitecap in the goal, now unbeaten in 10, 7 points ahead of second place Minnesota in the MLS West. They went into the weekend 5 points up in the conference. They could now lose 2 games in a row and still hold first place in the MLS West. This is cushion, baby. And they're 2 better than Columbus in the overall league table.
And now they get a normal work week. After all of these Champions Cup games have broken it up and made it an absolute grind, forcing them into rotation matches over the last 2 MLS games, which
and there was more of that on Saturday. Yeah. Veselinovic did not start at center back, and he has been one of the stalwarts. You had Rio starting up top for Brian White.
Brian White's injured or dinged. They're just being really cautious with Brian White. I don't think there's any worry there per se. They know they have some leash, so they're like, you know what, we're just not going to dress them. They didn't matter. They still won. So, the next 2 weeks and the next 13 days before they're, skip a week. I think that's the next time we see the A1 team. I think this week again is probably half rotational. Sabi didn't start. I think he'll start. There's a bunch of guys they can rotate back in, and I think they're going to be just fine. And of course, we're not far from Ryan Gauld or Matthias Laborna.
No, I mean, you kept, and we were guilty of it. You sat there and just kept saying to yourself, okay, when is the other shoe going to drop here with all these midweek games? And then all this travel. Mexico, Miami, like really far away destinations.
Berhalter didn't start this past week, so another guy that can start this coming week. So.
Yeah. Anyways, they're at home to the LA Galaxy. This is Sunday. It's a 4 p.m. game Sunday to the LAFC. They're at home Sunday, 4 p.m. to LAFC. This from MLS Communications. The Whitecaps have become the 6th team in MLS history to take at least 26 points in their first 11 games. Only 33 points available here. They've taken 26 of them. And that's only the 4th team since the shootout era. They used to go to shootouts. So we're now talking about a team that is ranking with, historically, the best we've ever seen in this league through the 1/3 mark of the regular season. We should note, they have rescheduled, if you have tickets, a May 31st home match versus Cascadia rival Portland to a later date. That is, of course, to accommodate the June 1st CONCACAF Champions Cup final versus Cruz Azul in Mexico City. They will be playing that May 28th home match versus Minnesota. We get going with regular Wednesday games in the MLS schedule that week. So they'll play Minnesota on the Wednesday, and then they will take off for Mexico to see if they can lift a trophy.
And this is the best case scenario for you, the fan, right now, because, well, A, they're 5-1 at home, so they are taking care of their fans and their season ticket holders, but they're also entertaining them, as opposed to the poor soccer fans in Kansas City this weekend, Matt. They saw their team win, which is great. That's half of the equation that you want for a sports franchise in any sport. They did so for the first time in Major League Soccer history. They won their game without taking a shot. And you're thinking, Blake, you mean shot on goal. They didn't get any shots on goal. No. They didn't take a shot. Mm-hmm. They did not swing their foot and connect with the soccer ball towards the goal.
No, not at once. 90-plus minutes. And somewhere in Vegas, Rick Tocchet is sitting back going, I don't know why they're asking me about all these shots. See, it's proven.
You don't need to shoot.
You win a game without a shot.
A dreadful own goal
yeah.
for the LA Galaxy, defending champion LA Galaxy, who are still winless. That set an MLS record, too, by the way.
Hey, the other thing, we talked about this a little before going on. The Whitecaps, I don't want to take anything away from them. They have been splendid, an absolute joy to watch. Fantastic soccer, guys fitting in, guys improving. There are so many good storylines with the Whitecaps right now. But I'm beginning to suspect there's some teams in the MLS West that have regressed since last season.
Yeah, potentially.
You take a look at some of these teams, and of course, some of them are brands and flagships for this loop, and they just don't seem to be in the same real estate, getting the same results that we're accustomed to.
Portland lost one of the best players in the league, and they are third in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Like I thought Portland was going to be terrible this year.
Portland, Austin, and the new San Diego expansion team have sort of been that next cluster.
Yeah.
But what's missing there? Both LA teams, Seattle, of course, like teams that were accustomed to being real threats, and teams that the Whitecaps have had trouble with in the past.
I think LAFC is going to find their footing here. They're tied with San Diego. They're in the fourth position at 17 points. Let's monitor them a little bit. Seattle was supposed to be better this year, and they're 4-3-4. Like, there's not much there yet. Long season. They're only at the 1/3 mark of the schedule so far, but we'll see. I mean, as we've said with every sport, though, points don't matter where you get them. That may affect people's confidence in you going into the playoffs, but 26 points is a lot of points. They only had 13 wins all of last year. They've already got 8.
Well, and it's sort of reminding me of the Canucks, not this past season, but the previous season, where they were on such a heater in the beginning of the year that we got to December and we were like, well, they can't screw it up from here. Like,
No.
They're absolutely going to be a playoff team. It's just about where they're going to slot into the playoffs. I'm not sure we're quite there yet with the Whitecaps. Remember, 3-point games here in soccer. But a few more wins, Blake, and we're talking about a playoff team. It's just going to be about, can they finish it off and be the top seed in the West, or are they going to slot in somewhere beneath?
Well, it's also a franchise that hasn't won many trophies, and they've got a chance to win one at the end of June. That's been officially announced now, June 1st, down in Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
And if they continue to be anywhere close to this winning percentage, Matt, they'll get a supporter shield too. And, that would be a first on both fronts for the Whitecaps. And there's not many teams that have won that dual trophy of the Champions Cup and the supporter shield.
And, of course, all this success should help the sales process as well.
You would think.
When you're getting a team of this quality. Poor Vancouver Warriors. They are out of the NLL playoffs in the semis after getting swept by Buffalo in their best-of-3 series. They fell 11-9 at Rogers Arena Sunday in Game 2. They were game, but they're
up 8-6.
Yeah, they couldn't match the two-time reigning champions when it came down to crunch time. They lost Game 1 9-3 Friday. Teddy Jenner told us it would be a raucous environment in Buffalo. It's the best crowd, best atmosphere in the NLL, and boy, was it ever. Like, everybody was in a damn jersey. Holy cow, was that a great crowd.
Not a lot to do in Buffalo.
And
doesn't surprise me.
Before they made the Christian Del Bianco trade back in February, anybody who followed the Warriors or NLL would have told you the Warriors' number one need was scoring. That lack of offense had been what was holding them back. Now, they got Del Bianco. They really stabilized the goal prevention. They became a terrific defensive outfit. That helped fuel some more offensive opportunities, so the scoring got better. But I think you're into the offseason now feeling really good about where you are in goal prevention and needing to find a couple of more guys who can put it in the net. And if that's the case, it should be onwards and upwards for the Vancouver Warriors. But a terrific season for them. They got lacrosse and this franchise back on the map with BC sports fans, and that was no small feat given how much losing they had done. It had been 8 years since this team had been in the playoffs. They had never qualified for the playoffs under the Warriors brand or had a game at Rogers Arena. They ticked all those boxes. Huge props to Dax Aquilini and Kurt Milosky for providing the direction, the leadership, and the
A pretty exciting offseason for them now, too, because, as you mentioned, like it's pretty singularly focused. Get a few more goals in there. And
Kind of like the Canucks. They need a few more
Yeah.
scores. They feel good about their goal prevention. Seas lose 2 of 3 over the weekend at the Nat, but they still split the homestand with Hillsborough. Deserved better yesterday. Pitched 7 hitless innings between starter Jackson Wentworth, and who had 5 and 2 by closer Bo Bonds, but they fell 2-1. They're off to Spokane to begin a series tomorrow. They're back at home a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, May 13th, for a 6-game set against the Everett Aqua Sox. Everett is the farm team of the Seattle Mariners. We talk about the Blue Jays prospects that are there with the Seas, including Arjun Namala, who's getting a lot of shine now, the 19-year-old shortstop, across Major League Baseball and across prospect outlets. The M's have some very good prospects on this Everett team. We'll tell you more about them later next week as the week goes along. Tickets, of course, 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com. Poll question results, Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Friday. It's a change of ownership, what the Canucks need most. An overwhelming vote total here, or lopsided vote total. 90% said yes on 2,400 plus votes. Malcolm, beyond any doubt, more important than a Hughes extension. We did find some naysayers. Jim said, hell no, we need a coaching staff in place to show Hughes that the Canucks are serious about keeping his Norris winning ass in Van City. Jay, take the emotion out of it. This is a business, and here are the facts. Product has been below average the last 15 years, except for 1 or 2 blips. Multiple turnover in roster coaches, GM president, water kids, ushers, concession stops. One constant, ownership. And RMK says it would be better than a draft lottery win.
that's where people are putting.
Perhaps only because they can move
Only
up
go to fifth, yes.
And it's even if they could go to first, I'm not sure this is the year.
Right. Why waste your good luck on a year like this?
Yeah. Errors and omissions, just something to clarify with regards to getting the AHL TV package or streaming package and being able to watch the baby Canucks.
Yeah, Colin from the Caribou says, until this season, AHL TV, as it was called then, allowed you to subscribe to just your team for a cheaper rate than the full AHL package. For all Abbey regular season home and away games, I paid $70 and then $35 for the AHL playoffs, which gave me access to everything. As of this season, they've got this Flow Sports thing. And the only subscription is to pay 1 year at a time for $203. That's more than I pay to watch the NHL on Sportsnet.
Yeah. I mean, $70 is $1 a game. That's very reasonable. Yeah. Anyways. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with the program. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us telling you about and keep it local.